Hey everyone, welcome back to Latinx in Iowa. Here today you'll find me with Rita Guzmán, who is from Decorah, Iowa, and right now she's living in Chicago. She attended the University of Iowa and she went abroad for a hot second and was a Fulbright grantee. So Fulbright is a national, basically international, really, organization that grants students the opportunity to go abroad, teach, research, study. You can get a master's degree abroad, and they even send other students to come to the United States and do all the same things as well. So there's a lot of great opportunities out there post-graduation, and Rita has done one of those. So Rita, why don't you start off by giving us a little bit of background? Where's your family from? How did they end up in Decorah?
Yes, so thank you for having me. So a little bit about myself. I'm the proud daughter of Dominican immigrants. So both of my parents came from the Dominican Republic to the US in pursuits of higher education, essentially. And then through a slew of different opportunities, they ended up in my hometown of Decorah, Iowa. Yeah, I know. It sounds pretty random, but hey, there are Dominicans in Iowa. We exist. So
Listen,
yeah,
yeah.
that's how my family and I got to the States and got to Decorah specifically. I grew up in Iowa, especially Decorah, all of my life up until I went to the University of Iowa, and that's when I transitioned to moving to Iowa City. So
Mhm.
for me, a way more diverse and way bigger city,
Yeah.
especially in comparison to Decorah, which has about 8,000 people. So
Hmm.
definitely a transition there.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's kind of the beginnings of a lot of things. So
Yeah. So what did you study at the University of Iowa? And how did you decide to study that? What was your like track to getting there?
yeah, so when I was a junior in high school, I had the opportunity to go to LA for a music business camp. It's called Grammy Camp. For those of you who are really interested in music, entertainment,
Yeah.
music business, definitely look into Grammy Camp. It's actually one of the educational branches of the Recording Academy. So essentially the people that do the Grammys. So it's one
Uh-huh.
of their programs from the Grammys.
Wow.
So yeah, I did that junior year of high school. So those of you, please apply. It's a great program. And I went into college thinking, oh, I really want to do music industry. Iowa doesn't have a program specifically for that, but marketing is pretty close, and marketing is
Hmm.
very transferable to a variety of other industries should I change my mind in the future. So I decided on marketing, but I also chose marketing because I definitely saw it as a social science. So marketing incorporates a lot of the ways that people think and people act,
Hmm.
and how you influence or sometimes even deter people from doing
Hmm.
certain things. So that's why I did marketing. I did international business because I really wanted to have a career that had an international aspect. And my
Hmm.
dream at the time was to live and work abroad for as long as I could. And then, so that's why I did an international business certificate in addition
Hmm.
to the marketing major. Now, I also knew, in addition to all of those things, that I wanted to learn another language.
Hmm.
Now, the University of Iowa has a really fantastic Portuguese program. And
Hmm.
I happen to have a family in Brazil that, even though I spoke Spanish, Spanish and Portuguese are similar, but they
Hmm.
are not the same. So I
Mm-mm.
wanted to be able to communicate with them. So that was one of the reasons why I wanted to take Portuguese. And I did that as a minor.
Hmm.
Throughout my time at the University of Iowa, that they initially started leading up to thinking about international experiences a lot more seriously.
Yeah.
So the College of Business would host information sessions and fairs about international opportunities all the time. The first time I went abroad, I didn't do too much on the
Hmm.
planning side. I was just kind of like, oh my gosh, this is cool, let's go.
Hmm.
Um, but I ended up doing a faculty-led course that
Hmm.
counted towards my major in
Cool.
London. And I got to
Wow.
meet, and I got
That's
to
really
meet,
cool.
yes, it was a really great exposure to, I never been to London before. So it was really great exposure to what London was like, because I
Hmm.
had this dream in my head, like, oh, I want to live and work in London. So it was a good taste of that. It was a great opportunity to meet other Iowa students that I probably would never have been friends with had we not been on that program. So that like 2-week short-term class definitely opened other doors and made me want to keep going abroad more and more. So after that study abroad experience, I ended up with more planning. And if you're studying abroad, I definitely recommend plan things out. That works well for so many reasons. But I ended up doing an internship in Dublin through
Dublin?
internship. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. In
International,
Dublin.
that's awesome.
Yes. Okay. And I will tell you that international internship experience changed my whole career trajectory too, because I was a marketing major that was like, oh, I want to work in music and entertainment. But I'm really open to anything because I don't really know what you can do specifically marketing. It sounds so general. And for my placement, I was a radio host in Dublin for a community radio station. So I got to interview people on the air. I interviewed like at least 50 different people from Ireland and Europe, which was a ton of fun. I even got to record commercials because my accent was so different to what people were accustomed to.
It catch your attention.
Got called, they were like, can you record commercials for our gym? Or can you record commercials for our accounting firm? Just because like, talking about marketing principles, it's utilizing that difference in voice, and it catches people's attention. So that was a fabulous experience. I love Ireland, and I love Dublin. But I also learned through the center staff of the program that I was on, I learned that international education and international opportunities after you graduate are a thing. I never knew that international education was a field or an industry. Like I just didn't, I don't know what I thought, what international was. Probably a lot more in like it's business, but I didn't know what that meant either. But I was like, international is very much like, it's just business. That's all it is. But no, it can expand to a variety of different realms like education.
And that's really cool. I feel like it's really, like you really don't know what's out there until you kind of like keep taking like each step until you start like seeing all these like opportunities really. And that's awesome. Like you literally started like navigating this like international space almost on accident, but like kind of intentionally at the same time. And you kind of like carved out that path. International education is a really cool business to be a part of.
But I will say, so especially with that internship, that's what kickstarted a lot of like international focus. I was like, how do I get abroad again and for a longer amount of time? So I worked for the study abroad office afterwards for the College of Business as a program ambassador for the international internships. And then it just kind of like, I don't know, snowballed like that to the point where, it was about a year and a half out from graduation. And I was still kind of like, okay, but how can I do this for longer and go abroad? And I'd known about Fulbright because my mom actually did a Fulbright from the Dominican Republic to the US.
Wow.
Yeah. But the process is very different for, international exchange coming to the US than it is for US students to go outside. And I went to an information session and I continued with the application and the process. And long story short, after I graduated, I ended up doing a Fulbright in Portugal to teach English. So it was just kind of like, international experience one after the other. So, And
now you work with international students, right?
I do.
To get that international experience.
Yes, I do. So it's very, very full circle because now, I work for a company that provides study abroad and internship abroad opportunities to very diverse students. And we want to make study abroad and interning abroad as accessible as possible. So it's very, very full circle. And I'm talking to centers. We have locations all over the world. So
and I tell my students all the time that, studying abroad is something that can be like done very easily. I mean, I did the intern program for India, and that was like a 3-week program in the middle of like semesters. You can do a summer one, you can do like the one in Spain, you can do semester long, you can do year long. There's so many different types of opportunities, and sometimes there's so much financial aid available for to study abroad.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do so much with it. So
Mm-hmm.
that's definitely something that you want to check out if you go to a college or university that has like an international programs office, which most of them will. If
Mm-hmm.
they have study abroad programs, you just hop in there and see what options you have. And that's the coolest thing about a university. I feel like it's very set up for exploration, and they're really set up to like give you those 21st century skills and globalize you as a student. So they're ready to like give you that plane ticket so you can go to that place you've always wanted to go.
Mm-hmm.
Even
Yeah.
like alternative spring breaks, for example, that are becoming more popular across many campuses. You can go for a week during your spring break, and you can go help out another part, a town, or you can do some like volunteer work in another area of the United States, which I think
Mm-hmm.
is like a very like cool thing to get out of town as well. So I know you're Latinx, but more specifically, you're Afro-Latinx, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And that's intersectional, right? Because that means you're a Black Latino, right? Let's
Yes.
remember that being Latino does not mean your race; it's your ethnicity, right?
Yes.
Where you come
Yes.
from, south of the border. How did you experience Iowa, right? Did
Yeah.
you have like a lot of like identity crisis, I guess, in terms of?
Yeah. So you know what's really, really interesting, and that well, I mentioned earlier, coming to Iowa City was definitely a transition. So being from small town Iowa, where everyone knows each other, everyone
Mm-hmm,
had always known us to be the Dominicans
mm-hmm,
in town. No one had ever asked us anything, especially regarding to our race. Like
mm-hmm,
no questions. It's just like we were Dominicans, even for our family at the time. And I never understood why like my parents would do this until later, but they used to mark on the census like black and white.
mm-hmm,
And to me, I was like, oh, like if someone asked me like, well, what is your race? Like, are you mixed? Are you black? Are you white? Are you
mm-hmm.
both? I'd be like, oh, I'm Dominican, which that's not, that's
Mm-hmm.
not a clear answer.
Yeah.
That was not a clear answer at all. And it wasn't until I got to Iowa City is when I had so many identity crises that I was like, wait, what am I? What spaces can I move
Uh-huh.
into? I had friends, I had a lot of people when I got to Iowa City asking me, like, what are you? Like,
Yeah.
are you
Yeah.
Black? Are you mixed? And
Mm-hmm.
I would at first I'd say, like, I'm Dominican. And they're like, but that's
Mm-hmm.
not, like, that doesn't answer the question. I was like, I don't know what you want me to say. Like, I'm Dominican. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's it. It wasn't until probably towards the end of, I'm trying to remember the exact moment, because so I hadn't really heard of the term Afro-Latinidad or
Mm-hmm.
Afro-Latinx or even Latinx until
Mm-hmm.
probably the beginning of my sophomore year, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot, so I remember at the time, there were a lot of, especially like at the time, BuzzFeed articles talking about these terms.
Yeah.
And I remember texting my mom, asking mommy, like, are we Afro-Latinas? Like, what does this mean? I even Wikipedia searched what
Yeah.
that term meant. And for those of you who may not be as familiar, like, well, what Victor said is like Black Latinos. So Latinos that
Mm-hmm.
have African descent, which
Mm-hmm.
are a lot.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot, especially
Mm-hmm.
like, well, in a lot of the Caribbean islands, like Dominican Republic, Cuba, Puerto Rico,
Mm-hmm.
and others though, like in
Mm-hmm.
Mexico too.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked up the term and I was like, what? That means everybody from the island, like that describes us. And I texted my mom and her response was like, well, yeah, because we are a mix of predominantly Black, from especially West Africa, but
Mm-hmm.
in some cases, even from the like Black Americans from the US, depending on what time frame you're
Mm-hmm.
talking about in Dominican history. So we're a mix of that, white from the Spaniards,
Mm-hmm.
and a little bit of indigenous from the Tainos in Dominican
Mm-hmm.
Republic. But essentially what I try to explain, especially to my American friends, is that essentially we're a mixture of like Black and white, more predominantly Black in a lot of
Mm-hmm.
senses. And yeah, I hadn't ever confronted any of that until, yeah, like my sophomore year of college, and me texting my mom, like, Mom, are we Afro-Latino? She's like, yeah, like this is our background. We're very,
Mm-hmm.
technically, we're very, very mixed throughout hundreds
Mm-hmm.
and hundreds of years at this point. But,
Mm-hmm.
and there is a lot of colorism and racism within a lot of Latinx communities. So unfortunately, not everyone recognizes their
Mm-hmm.
Afro-Latinidad. However, a lot of like, there would not be, I can tell you so many things about Dominican culture that would not exist without like our Blackness.
Yeah,
Music,
yeah.
our food, our dancing. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Like just three main
Mm-hmm.
things that it wouldn't be the same. So
I mean, the Caribbean
yeah.
is the backbone of like a lot of like Latin music today. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So it's like I
Yes.
think we have to owe it to
Hmm.
the Blackness from those areas too. I mean,
Yeah.
their roots are very embedded in even like in the music.
Hmm.
And I think that's very important too.
Hmm.
Thank you for sharing, by the way.
Yeah.
I think what really comes down to it is that Latinidad, right? Being Latinx is very like complex, and there's so much that goes into it. And even like in college, you start gaining access to terms like this,
Hmm.
right? Or like understanding for yourself, and you start finding these areas where your identity is almost affirmed as well. But Rita, did you ever find like a space where you could kind of explore your identity or feel like included in terms of being Latinx?
Yeah, so I will say, but this is something that has fortunately changed since I
Mhm,
was a student. And that's, I have to shout out Zahara Al Abdul Rasul, who is one of my mentees. She's Iraqi Dominican, doing
mhm,
wonderful things on addressing intersectionality of Latinx people, including Afro-Latinidad. So shout out to Zahara for continuing that.
mhm,
But to be really honest, it wasn't, and some of my friends even point out, like, you have the access and ability to move between three different spaces. So black, white, and brown, that
mhm,
other people like you have, based on your experiences, you can move between those spaces with a lot of ease. And I think it was great that, I could interact with so many people without a lot of issues. But to be honest, it wasn't until probably the end of my junior year that I started to explore, especially more of the LNAC, and a little bit of the Afro House on attending events. I will say, so Afro Latinos especially are not really represented in Iowa to begin
mhm,
with.
mhm,
That being said, I confronted a lot of notions of what people thought it meant to be Latinx. And
mhm,
I, especially physically, did not
mhm,
meet that expectation.
mhm,
And I remember there were a few instances, and I love the LNAC, and it
mhm,
wasn't typically with students though, it was like community members that may not have been as exposed to a lot more diversity.
mhm,
Like I remember going to the LNAC and I'm feeling like I had to prove my Latinidad by
mhm,
speaking a little bit of Spanish so
mhm,
people understood that,
mhm.
oh, that's why you're here.
Yeah.
Because I can remember a couple of instances where people were kind of like looking at me like why is she, and I
Mhm,
like drop a few words and then people get like kind of like, oh, because my accent is more on the Caribbean, like Dominican side.
mhm,
And so there was that. But because especially the students and the staff that help out at the cultural houses, like having conversation with them, and they started to have a lot more open dialogues to what it means to be Latinx. And like, so I started an Afro-Latinidad panel, or at the time it was kind of more like different perspectives on
mhm,
Latinx identity and what that could look like,
mhm,
including
mhm.
Afro-Latinx.
Cool.
Um,
That's really awesome.
yeah, so I kind of started that project, and then Zahara like took it to like
Uh-huh.
another
Yeah.
level, and
Yeah.
it's grown from there. And then the LNAC has hosted a lot of events like that to address identity and the diversity between like what Latinx looks like, because it's not singular. And some people still have this one mindset, like being Latinx looks like this.
Mhm.
That's not always the case.
Yeah.
Even like discounting Portuguese speaking people, Brazilians,
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
they are also in Latin America and South
Mhm.
America. So, and technically they do count as Latinx, but they always get discounted because
Mhm.
they don't speak Spanish. And I
Yeah.
remember even talking to some of my Brazilian friends at the forum that I held, and they were like, thanks for bringing that up, because no one ever talks about that.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think things have definitely changed though, because they're having a lot more identity, um, focused talks and events. Same thing with the Afro House too, because there's intersectionality.
Yeah.
There is intersectionality. So
Mhm.
yeah,
There's intersectionality, and the key word is intersectionality across
yes.
many different identities, and we have to start like almost acknowledging it, especially in Iowa,
Mhm.
because I feel like intersectionality is growing even
Mm-hmm.
more and more and more as we become more of a diverse state.
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing that I really took away from your final answer was impact. The
Yes.
impact showed. I feel like you did a really, you saw, okay, there's a deficit. Um, they're in the Latinx community, they're not recognizing me as Latinx. So I have to do this effort to like speak Spanish to prove myself.
Mm-hmm.
I realize all these like areas where there's not enough representation of these different Latino people. And so how do I work around this? And you were a problem solver and you started
Mm-hmm.
this initiative and then someone carried it on and made it even and took it to that next level, like you said. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's something that's so powerful to listen to because we need to start taking initiative and create the change that we want to see, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it can be on a large scale, like doing panels, or it can even be the change you want to see within yourself, right? So if you want to be a better student in XYZ, and um, how can you get there? Set objectives to meet your final goal, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
think there's so many different things to take away from that impact statement that you made. And I can definitely see the impact you made, especially now that there's been a cultural shift almost at the University of
Mm-hmm.
Iowa around that
Yeah.
word you learned sophomore year, like
Yes.
Afro-Latina. Isn't that cool?
Yes,
Um,
exactly.
yeah, that's so cool. Like gives me goosebumps. Um, so like, um, I guess to kind of like wrap this up with one question, and this is kind of like the most important question to me, um, is what does being a Latinx Iowan mean to you?
Latinx Iowa means to keep pushing for representation and see yourself in spaces wherever. To not let anyone or anything deter you that you don't belong in a space because you do. You
Hmm.
definitely do.
Hmm.
So essentially it's like speaking up and speaking out, becoming involved wherever you can, wherever your interests lie. You are more than capable to study literally anything under the sun. I'm thinking of all the Iowa majors, like the College of Business. Latinx students are definitely welcome.
Hmm.
Same with psychology, anything from Africana studies, you name it, you belong there. So
Hmm.
that's what an Iowa Latinx means to me, is like keep pushing and putting yourself out there.
Yeah, stretch. If you want to do it, you are literally capable to do it. You
Mm-hmm.
just have to get there. You have to fail to get there. You have to push and push and push, right? Because it's not nothing's easy. You have to work for it.
Mm-hmm.
That thank you so much, Rita. I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom with my students. I hope they take something away from this. And I look forward to chatting with you soon at a later date because I love catching up.
Yes,
Okay,
sounds
thank
good. Thank you
you.
so much for having me.